Breaking news from Vatican City, Pope Leo has finally spoken out about the traditional Latin Mass.
Big news is coming out of Rome. Pope Leo has officially broken his silence on the debate over the traditional Latin Mass. For the first time, he has taken a clear step into the discussion. At the same moment, Archbishop Vigano released a powerful open letter directed at the Pope, a passionate appeal in defense of what he sees as the heart of the Catholic faith. While this is happening, the influence of Pope Francis's pastoral legacy is still being felt. One example is the introduction of a new liturgical form called the Mayan-style Mass for Creation. This unusual development has raised many questions within the Church. To understand where all of this may lead, make sure to stay with us until the end. In recent months, communities that follow the traditional Latin Mass have faced growing restrictions across the world, from Texas to Charlotte to Detroit. Many of these limitations came with little explanation, leaving many faithful confused and discouraged. But now, there's finally a bit of positive news. After a long period of silence and sudden decisions, the Vatican has granted a 2-year extension for the Latin Mass at St. Margaret Parish in San Angelo, Texas. This is the first special allowance of its kind under the leadership of Pope Leo. The decision, dated May 28, 2025, was confirmed by Bishop Michael Sis, who officially received approval from the Dicastery for Divine Worship. This special permission, technically called a derogation from Article 3, Paragraph 2 of Traditionis Custodes, allows the celebration of the traditional Latin Mass using the 1962 Missal to continue for at least 2 more years within the parish church. Under the strict policies followed up until now, this practice was expected to be stopped entirely, with no exceptions. Father Ryan Rojo, who serves as the Director of Vocations and also helps care for the traditional Catholic community in the area, openly shared his appreciation. He thanked both the Pope and the Vatican office responsible for the decision, expressing relief and hope on behalf of the faithful who attend the Latin Mass. In a time when the older form of the Mass has often been treated like something outdated or unwelcome, this decision stands out. It interrupts a pattern of bans and exclusions. Even though it's a small gesture, it speaks loudly. Tradition is still alive, and maybe not everything is lost. Pope Leo, who took office only a few months ago, has so far left in place the legal structure created by his predecessor. However, by allowing this official extension, he shows a slight but meaningful shift away from the previous firm stance. It's a cautious move, but one that sends a message, not through bold statements, but through quiet action. This decision suggests a possible openness to rethink the previous approach. Some see it as a sign of careful reflection, while others view it as just a small administrative step. But in the life of the Church, nothing is ever completely neutral. The fact that people are now speaking once again about dialogue, accompaniment, and even concessions, instead of only restrictions, is already a noticeable change in tone. It may signal the beginning of a shift, where the Pope is no longer simply enforcing rules written by others, but instead acting as a true spiritual father, one who listens to his people. Still, one question remains. Is this the start of a new direction for the Church, or simply a brief moment of relief that will soon pass? This quiet shift was met with a strong and passionate response from Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. On the feast of Saints Peter and Paul, he released a powerful letter, full of emotion and sharp insight, calling on Pope Leo to bring back what he described as the Roman soul of the Church. For Archbishop Vigano, now largely sidelined by the very institution he once faithfully served, the ongoing restrictions on the traditional Latin Mass are not just about liturgy. He believes they reflect something deeper, a growing hostility toward the Church's Roman identity itself. In his reflection, Archbishop Vigano reminds us that being truly Catholic means being citizens of the Rome where, in the words of the poet Dante, Christ is Roman. He isn't talking about the city as just a place on a map, but as something much deeper. Rome, in this sense, is a spiritual center, a sacred tradition, a culture rooted in centuries of faith. It's expressed through a shared language, a liturgical calendar, a treasury of saints, and sacred rites passed down from generation to generation. Because of this, Vigano boldly declares that all those who have tried to tear down this rich inheritance from the time of Martin Luther to the reformers of the Second Vatican Council, are united by the same anti-Roman mindset. He sees their actions not as isolated reforms, but as part of a broader effort to cut the Church off from its roots. Vigano directly accuses certain leaders of the Second Vatican Council of allowing a small group of modernists to reshape the liturgy under the name of progress. In doing so, he believes they drained Latin of its spiritual meaning and turned the sacred liturgy into something that constantly changes, losing its timeless character. Quoting Dom Guiranger, he emphasizes that hatred for the Latin language is a consistent trait among those who oppose the Church. This is because Latin preserves unity and guards the deep strength of the Catholic faith. In one of the most emotional and passionate parts of his letter, Vigano addresses Pope Leo with a clear and urgent plea. He urges the Pope to let go of the confusion left behind by previous church reforms, what he calls Bergoglian excesses and liquid synodality. Instead, he asks him to fully embrace the role of the papacy, just as St. Peter did, feeding and guiding the flock with clarity, courage, and without compromise. According to Vigano, true mercy is not found in pleasing the world, but in telling the truth. Real peace comes not through constant change, but by remaining faithful. One striking example of the current direction in church liturgy is the newly announced Mass for the Care of Creation. The Vatican Press Office recently promoted it with great enthusiasm, and it's expected to be officially introduced in the coming days. At first glance, the name, sometimes called the Mass for the Climate, might sound like something from a parody or satirical magazine. But this is not a joke. It is, in fact, a real initiative. This comes after years in which the celebration of the traditional Roman Rite was restricted in parish churches for being seen as incompatible with the spirit of the post-conciliar reforms. Now, a new liturgy is being prepared, one that focuses on environmental issues, care for the earth, and ecological awareness. Its stated goal is to inspire the faithful to care more deeply about protecting the planet, our common home. However, to many observers, it feels more like a symbolic act meant to promote political or cultural messages, rather than a genuine effort to guide souls towards salvation. While environmental care is important, critics worry that such liturgies shift focus away from the eternal truths of the faith. The Mass for Creation will be presented by Cardinal Michael Czerny, who leads the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, an office closely tied to the environmental teachings emphasized during the previous pontificate. He will be joined by Monsignor Vittorio Viola, who is known for his outspoken criticism of the traditional Latin Mass. According to multiple credible sources, Monsignor Viola even authored a document that aimed to fully ban the ancient Roman Rite. He is also said to wear the episcopal ring of Archbishop Annibale Bugnini, the architect behind the sweeping liturgical changes that followed the Second Vatican Council. The situation has led to what many see as a strange and troubling paradox. In today's church, it appears easier to receive approval for an ecologically themed green Mass than to simply continue the Mass that formed generations of saints. Amazonian-style liturgies, Mayan-inspired rites, and now the Mass for Creation all seem to be welcomed, discussed, and celebrated. Meanwhile, the timeless Mass of St. Pius V, shared by saints, martyrs, and faithful for centuries, must rely on rare exceptions and temporary permissions just to survive. It raises a serious question. Why is every modern sensibility given room in the liturgy, except the one that shaped the Catholic faith for centuries? Pope Leo now finds himself at a crucial crossroads. The path he chooses from here could shape the future of the Church in a lasting way. He can follow the uncertain and often confusing approach of his predecessor, offering small concessions while avoiding real change, or he can take a bold step and mark a true turning point. He has the chance to restore the Church's liturgical and doctrinal identity, bringing back what many believe has been pushed aside for too long. The recent extension for the traditional Latin Mass is certainly a positive sign, but by itself it falls short. It offers hope, yes, but not yet a full solution. Tradition should not be treated as something that requires temporary approval. It is not a favor to be granted. It is part of the Church's foundation, something that must be honored and given its rightful place once again. And time is of the essence. The moment for deciding is now. The Church cannot wait forever. The faithful are watching, praying, and hoping for clarity. The choice is in the Pope's hands, whether to simply maintain the status quo or to lead with courage and conviction toward renewal rooted in truth. In many ways, the question of the liturgy is no longer just about the Mass. It has become a reflection of a deeper spiritual battle within the Church, a struggle between continuity and change, between timeless truth and modern adaptation. And this struggle is not new. It echoes through history whenever the Church finds herself at a turning point, called once again to choose between pleasing the world or remaining faithful to what she has always been. The traditional Latin Mass, often simply called the Mass of the Ages, carries more than just older words and gestures. For countless Catholics, it is a living link to their ancestors, to the saints, and to centuries of unbroken worship. It offers silence, reverence, mystery, elements many feel have been lost in the modern liturgical experience. And for those who have rediscovered it, the beauty of this form of worship is not just in its aesthetics, but in its ability to lift the heart and soul toward God in a profound and unshakable way. But in recent years, this form of the Mass has often been treated not as a treasure, but as a threat. Many faithful have been left confused by the harsh tone and restrictive measures aimed at those who simply wish to worship as their grandparents once did. Parish communities have been disbanded, priests have been reassigned, and the sense of belonging, of finding one's spiritual home in the Latin Mass, has too often been met with suspicion or silence from above. This tension has created a painful divide, a wound in the life of the Church that has yet to be healed. And now, into this moment steps Pope Leo. His decision to allow a limited extension is being closely watched, not just by traditional Catholics, but by the entire Church. For many, it's more than a policy choice, it's a signal. A sign of whether this new papacy will continue the trajectory of liturgical restriction or open a new chapter of understanding, dialogue, and unity. The Pope does not need to undo the Church's reforms. He does not need to declare sweeping reversals or ignite division. What he needs to do is simple but powerful. He can acknowledge that there is room in the Church for her own traditions, that the desire for the sacred, the reverent, and the eternal is not a threat, but a gift. In fact, the revival of traditional worship has not been fueled by anger or rebellion. It has been led, in many cases, by young people, young priests, and young families. Those who were born long after the reforms of the Second Vatican Council are now choosing, freely and joyfully, to return to the older rites, not out of nostalgia, but because they found something there that speaks deeply to their hearts. This quiet movement is growing not through politics, but through prayer. Not by force, but by faith. And this is what makes it so powerful. Because in a world that is loud, fast, and constantly changing, the Latin Mass offers something rare: stillness. In a time of confusion, it offers clarity. In a culture that chases trends, it remains rooted. And in an age that often forgets the sacred, it remembers. Of course, the Latin Mass is not the only path to holiness. The Church has always allowed for diversity in her liturgical expressions. But what is being asked now is simply this: can there be space for both? Can unity be built not by flattening differences, but by embracing the richness of the Church's full inheritance? This is the vision that many are praying Pope Leo will embrace. A vision not of division, but of integration. Not of suppression, but of harmony. And the moment to act is now. Because the Church is at a crossroads, not just liturgically, but spiritually. Around the world, we see signs of decline. Empty pews, vocations in crisis. Young people walking away not because the faith is too hard, but because it seems too shallow. What they long for is not entertainment, but truth. Not comfort, but conviction. And when they find the Latin Mass, many discover for the first time a sense of awe. They encounter the mystery of the Eucharist in a way that feels untouched by time. They experience a Church that still whispers eternity. If the Church is to grow again, not just in numbers, but in depth, she must draw from the deep wells of her tradition. Not as a rejection of the present, but as a foundation for the future. This is what is at stake. And this is why the question of the Latin Mass matters. Not because it is about preference or politics, but because it is about identity. Who are we as Catholics? What do we believe about worship, about the Eucharist, about the very presence of God in our midst? These are not secondary questions. They are the heart of everything. And Pope Leo, by God's providence, has been placed in a position to answer them, not just for today, but for generations to come. He can be the Pope who listened, the Pope who restored peace, the Pope who embraced both the new and the old, not by compromising the truth, but by affirming that truth is big enough to hold them both. Or he can let this moment pass. Let the opportunity slip away. The world is watching. The faithful are praying. Heaven is listening. And the time is now. At this moment in history, when so many voices speak, so many changes swirl, and so many hearts are searching, the Church does not need another program. She does not need another slogan or strategy. She needs clarity. She needs courage. And above all, she needs holiness. Whether you attend the Latin Mass or the Novus Ordo, whether you kneel in silence or sing with joy, what unites us is greater than what divides us. We are one Church, with one Lord and one mission: to seek God with all our hearts and to follow the truth wherever it leads. And so we pray for Pope Leo, that he may lead with wisdom, humility, and the strength of a true shepherd. We pray for our bishops and priests, that they may listen with open hearts and protect what is sacred. We pray for the faithful around the world, especially those who feel forgotten, silenced, or pushed to the margins. Do not lose heart. History shows us that the Church is always renewed through the fire of love and the power of grace. Even in times of confusion, God is working. Even when doors close, He opens windows of light. If you feel called, return to prayer. Rediscover the treasures of the faith. Hold fast to what is true, what is beautiful, and what is eternal. For in the end, it is not about liturgy alone, it is about the soul. And every soul matters to God. Thank you for watching. If this message spoke to your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who needs encouragement. Subscribe for more content on faith, tradition, and the future of the Church. And as always, may God bless you, and may He guide His Church safely through the storm.